I never thought a rubber mat would start a war with my homeowners association. But here I was, standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning watching my neighbor Deborah slip and nearly break her hip on the ice. My name is Ryan Young, and I have lived in Maple Ridge Estates in Boulder, Colorado for 5 years. The subdivision sits right at the base of the Rocky Mountains, where winter is not a suggestion but a brutal fact of life. When I bought my house, the heated driveway mats seemed like the perfect solution. They were rubber mats with heating elements inside that melted snow and ice on contact. No shoveling, no salt, no back-breaking labor at 6 in the morning before work. I laid them out across my driveway in October, plugged them into the outdoor outlets, and waited for winter. The first snow came in early November, a modest 4 inches that blanketed the neighborhood overnight. While everyone else scraped and shoveled, my driveway remained perfectly clear, the mats doing exactly what they promised. I left for work that morning feeling pretty smug about my purchase. That smugness lasted exactly 3 days. I came home on Thursday to find a letter taped to my front door. The envelope had the Maple Ridge Estates HOA logo stamped on it, which already made my stomach sink. Nothing good ever came from the HOA. I opened it while standing on my porch. "Dear Mr. Young," it read. "It has come to our attention that you have installed heated driveway mats without prior approval from the Architectural Review Committee. Per Section 7, Subsection 4 of the HOA Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, any external modifications or installations must receive written approval before implementation. Your heated driveway mats are considered an unapproved modification and must be removed within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $50. Sincerely, Patricia Henderson, HOA President." I read the letter 3 times, each read making me angrier than the last. They were rubber mats, not a new roof, not a fence, not even a permanent structure. Rubber mats that I could roll up and store in my garage during summer. How could this possibly violate any reasonable interpretation of the rules? I pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws that night and read through Section 7, Subsection 4. The language was vague enough to be dangerous. It mentioned external modifications including but not limited to structures, landscaping changes, exterior paint colors, and any installation visible from the street or neighboring properties. I suppose a good lawyer could argue that heated driveway mats fell under that umbrella, but it seemed like a ridiculous stretch. The next morning, I called the HOA office. A cheerful receptionist named Stacy answered and transferred me to Patricia Henderson. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Ryan Young from 432 Pinecrest Drive. I received your letter about my heated driveway mats." "Yes, Mr. Young." Her voice was crisp and matter-of-fact. "Have you begun removal?" "That is actually why I am calling. I do not understand how rubber mats constitute an external modification requiring approval. They are not permanent. They are not even particularly visible. They are black mats on a black driveway. The rules are quite clear, Mr. Young. Any installation requires approval. The mats are plugged into your exterior outlets, which means they are installed equipment. Furthermore, several neighbors have complained about the appearance. This caught me off guard. Complained about the appearance. They are barely noticeable. Be that as it may, complaints have been filed. The Architectural Review Committee has determined that the mats must be removed. You have 14 days. And if I want to appeal this decision, you may submit a written appeal to the committee. They meet once a month. The next meeting is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. But my 14 days will be up before then. Those are the procedures, Mr. Young. I suggest you remove the mats to avoid fines, and if your appeal is successful, You may reinstall them." I wanted to argue further, but I could tell it would be pointless. Patricia Henderson had the tone of someone who enjoyed wielding petty power. I thanked her for her time and hung up. That weekend, I drafted a detailed appeal. I included photos of the mats, specifications showing they were safe and non-permanent, and a petition signed by my immediate neighbors stating they had no objection to the mats. My next-door neighbor, Frank, even wrote a paragraph about how he wished he had thought of getting them first. I submitted the appeal on Monday and waited. Meanwhile, winter was not waiting with me. Another snowstorm hit the following week, this one dumping 8 inches overnight. My heated mats kept my driveway clear while everyone else dealt with the mess. I started to notice some dirty looks from neighbors I did not recognize, but most people on my street seemed fine with it. The 14-day deadline came and went. I had not removed the mats. Part of me wanted to wait for the appeal decision, but mostly I was just stubborn. If they wanted to fine me over rubber mats, let them try. Sure enough, another letter arrived. This one informed me that I was now being fined $50 per day, starting immediately, and that the fines would continue until the mats were removed. I did some quick math and felt my blood pressure spike. $50 a day was $1,500 a month. That was insane. I called a lawyer friend from college who did not practice HOA law but knew enough to give me general advice. His name was Marcus, and he had always been straightforward with me. "Ryan, here is the thing about HOA disputes," he said over the phone. "You can fight them, but it gets expensive fast. They have legal funds specifically for this kind of enforcement. Unless you are willing to spend thousands fighting over mats that cost you what, a few $100. 800, I admitted. There you go. Sometimes you have to pick your battles, pay the fine, remove the mats, show up to the appeal meeting and make your case. If they deny it, you have a clear driveway in summer and you shovel like everyone else in winter." I knew he was right, but it stuck in my throat like a dry pill. The principle of the thing bothered me more than the money, though the money bothered me plenty. The HOA meeting was scheduled for December 15th. I marked it on my calendar and planned what I would say. In the meantime, I paid the accumulated fines, which came to $700, and I removed the heated mats. I coiled them up and stored them in my garage, where they sat like a monument to bureaucratic overreach. December 15th arrived with another winter storm. This one was particularly nasty, with freezing rain that turned everything into a skating rink. I left early for the HOA meeting, which was held at the community clubhouse near the neighborhood entrance. The parking lot was a disaster. Ice covered every surface, and I watched 3 different people nearly fall just getting from their cars to the building. Inside, about 30 residents had gathered. Patricia Henderson sat at the front table with 4 other board members. She was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, short blonde hair styled into that specific suburban mom cut, and a pantsuit that screamed middle management. Next to her sat Donald Kraft, the vice president, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The other 3 board members I did not recognize. The meeting started with standard business, approval of last month's minutes, a discussion about holiday decorations, a debate about whether the community pool needed resurfacing. I sat through 45 minutes of tedium before they finally reached my appeal. "Next item," Patricia announced. "Appeal from Ryan Young regarding heated driveway mats. Mr. Young, you have 5 minutes to present your case." I stood up, my prepared notes in hand. "Thank you. I am appealing the decision to ban my heated driveway mats. These mats are non-permanent, safe, and create no visual disruption to the neighborhood. I have signed statements from my immediate neighbors supporting their use. The mats prevent ice buildup, which is a safety issue, as I think we all experienced tonight in the parking lot. I thought that last bit was a nice touch. Several people nodded. Patricia looked unmoved. Mr. Young, the issue is not safety or visibility. The issue is following proper procedures. You installed the mats without approval. Because I did not realize temporary rubber mats required approval. If I put out a doormat, does that need approval? What about a garden hose? At what point do we draw the line? The line is drawn in the covenants, Mr. Young. Anything plugged into exterior power sources and used as a permanent installation requires approval. But they are not permanent. I can remove them in 5 minutes. One of the other board members, a woman named Susan, spoke up. Can we just approve them retroactively? I mean, it seems like a simple solution. Patricia shot her a look that could freeze lava. The Architectural Review Committee already reviewed this case and denied it. We cannot simply overturn that decision without proper cause. What was their reason for denial? I asked. Patricia shuffled some papers. Aesthetic concerns and precedent. If we allow your heated mats, we would have to allow everyone's heated mats, and the committee felt that could lead to an inconsistent neighborhood appearance. But they are black mats on black driveways, I said, trying to keep my voice level. How is that aesthetically inconsistent? The decision has been made, Mr. Young. I looked around the room. Some residents looked sympathetic. Others looked bored. A few looked like they agreed with Patricia. I tried a different approach. Can I submit a formal application for the mats now, to be reviewed at the next committee meeting? Patricia sighed like I had just asked her to solve world hunger. You may submit an application, yes. The committee will review it at their next meeting in January. And in the meantime, the mats must remain removed or you will continue to accrue fines. I felt my jaw clench. This was pointless. They had no intention of approving anything. This was about control, pure and simple. Fine, I said. I will submit a new application. I sat down, my face burning. The meeting continued with other business, but I barely heard any of it. When it finally ended, I headed straight for my car. As I walked across the icy parking lot, I heard someone call my name. I turned to see an older gentleman I recognized from my street. His name was George, and he lived 4 houses down. That was some bureaucratic nonsense in there, George said, shuffling carefully across the ice. I have lived here for 15 years, and Patricia has gotten worse every year. Everything is a power trip with her. Is there any way to fight this? I asked. George shrugged. You could run for the board next election, but that is not until next fall. Or you could just do what most of us do, ignore the stupid rules and pay the fines when you get caught. $50 a day adds up fast. It does. But between you and me, I think Patricia has it out for you specifically. She mentioned your house at the last board meeting, said something about you being a troublemaker. A troublemaker. I have lived here for 5 years without a single complaint. I know. But her daughter Deborah lives across the street from you, and apparently Deborah complained about the mats. Said they made her driveway look bad by comparison. The pieces clicked into place. Deborah Martinez was Patricia's daughter. I knew Deborah lived across from me, but I had not made the connection. Deborah and her husband kept to themselves mostly, though I had noticed Deborah giving me weird looks lately. So this is personal, I said. Probably, George admitted. Patricia does not like it when people make her family look bad, even unintentionally. My advice: keep your head down, follow the rules, and wait for her term to end. I thanked George and drove home, my mind spinning. The roads were terrible, covered in ice and slush. It took me twice as long as usual to get back to my house. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the situation. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This was not about rules or aesthetics. This was about Patricia wielding power over someone because her daughter felt inadequate. It was petty and absurd and exactly the kind of HOA horror story you hear about but never think will happen to you. Then an idea came to me. It was not a nice idea. It was actually kind of petty on my end too. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If they would not let me use my heated mats, fine. I simply would not deal with my driveway at all. The HOA rules required homeowners to keep their driveways reasonably clear of snow and ice to maintain neighborhood aesthetics and safety. But what constituted reasonably clear? And what would they do if I just let the ice build up? They could fine me, sure, but they were already fining me. And here was the kicker. My driveway sat at the top of a slope that led down to the main street. When ice built up on my driveway, it spread onto the street right at a spot where everyone had to turn. The next snowfall came 3 days later, 6 inches of heavy, wet snow. I watched through my window as my neighbors came out to shovel and clear their driveways. My driveway sat untouched. By evening, cars driving up and down the street had packed the snow on my driveway into a slick, icy mess. The temperature dropped overnight, turning everything into a solid sheet of ice that extended from my garage door down the slope and onto the main street. The following morning, I woke to the sound of spinning tires. I looked out to see Deborah's BMW stuck at the bottom of my driveway, wheels spinning uselessly on the ice patch that had spread across the intersection. She finally gave up and left her car there, walking back to her house in obvious frustration. Over the next hour, 3 more cars got stuck or slid through the intersection. One minivan actually slid backwards into a mailbox. I felt a little guilty about that, but I reminded myself that I had tried to solve this problem with heated mats. They had forced my hand. By noon, I had another letter from the HOA. This one demanded I clear my driveway immediately or face increased fines. I called Patricia's office. Mrs. Henderson, I received your letter about clearing my driveway. Yes, Mr. Young, your driveway is creating a safety hazard. It must be cleared immediately. I understand your concern. However, I injured my back recently and cannot shovel. I was relying on my heated mats for exactly this situation. This was not entirely a lie. My back was sore from moving boxes the previous weekend. Then hire someone to clear it, Patricia snapped. I have called several services. Everyone is backed up because of the storm. The earliest someone can come is next week. Silence on the other end. Then, Mr. Young, I know what you are doing. I am not doing anything, Mrs. Henderson. I am simply following the rules. You banned my heated mats, which was my method of keeping the driveway clear. Now I am unable to clear it by other means. I am doing my best. Your driveway is a safety hazard. Then perhaps you should have let me keep my heated mats. I could hear her breathing heavily. The fines will increase to $100 per day until the driveway is cleared. That is your choice to make, Mrs. Henderson. I will clear it as soon as I am physically able and can find a service to help. I hung up before she could respond. The ice situation got worse over the next few days. The temperature stayed below freezing, so nothing melted. More snow fell, adding to the buildup. My driveway became impassable, and the ice patch at the bottom spread even further into the intersection. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded with complaints about the icy intersection. Several people mentioned that someone should call the city, but the intersection was on private HOA property, so the city would not touch it. Then Deborah posted, "Someone needs to do something about the ice at the corner of Pinecrest and Maple. It is incredibly dangerous." The homeowner is clearly not maintaining their property. Others chimed in, agreeing. But a few people defended me, pointing out that the HOA had banned my heated mats, which would have prevented this exact problem. George posted, "Maybe the HOA should reconsider their decision about Ryan's heated mats. They were a practical solution to exactly this situation." Patricia responded within minutes. "The HOA maintains standards for all residents. Individual convenience does not override established rules." The thread devolved into arguments. Some people sided with Patricia about following rules. Others pointed out that the rules seemed arbitrary and were now creating more problems than they solved. Meanwhile, I continued to receive violation notices. The fines climbed to over $2,000. I ignored them all. A week into my ICE protest, I got a knock on my door. It was Patricia herself, along with Donald Kraft and another board member I did not know. I opened the door but did not invite them in. "Can I help you?" Patricia's face was flushed red, and I could not tell if it was from cold or anger. Probably both. "Mr. Young, this has gone far enough. Your driveway is creating a dangerous situation for the entire neighborhood. I am aware. I have been unable to clear it, unable or unwilling." She snapped, "Unable. As I explained on the phone, my back is injured and all the snow removal services are backed up." Donald spoke up, his voice more measured. "Mr. Young, we understand there may have been some miscommunication about your heated mats. What if we could reach a compromise?" Patricia shot him a look, but he continued. "What if we granted temporary approval for your mats until spring, and then you could submit a formal application for permanent approval?" I pretended to consider this. "What about the fines I have already paid, and the fines that have accumulated?" Patricia crossed her arms. "The fines stand. You violated the rules." "Then we have nothing to discuss," I said. "I violated the rules by trying to keep my driveway clear. Now I am violating different rules by failing to keep my driveway clear. Either way, you fine me. So I might as well choose the option that requires less work on my part." "This is absurd," Patricia said. "I agree. This entire situation is absurd. You banned a practical safety device and now you are dealing with the consequences." Donald tried again. "What if we waived the current fines in exchange for you clearing the driveway and agreeing to proper procedures going forward?" I looked at Patricia. She was grinding her teeth, clearly hating every word of Donald's proposal. "No," I said. "I want my heated mats approved, retroactively and going forward. I want all fines refunded, and I want an apology for this ridiculous waste of everyone's time." Patricia actually laughed, sharp and bitter. "You cannot be serious, completely serious. That will never happen," she said. "Then I guess my driveway stays icy. Have a nice day." I closed the door through the window. I watched them argue on my front porch for a solid minute before walking back to Patricia's car. She nearly slipped on my front walkway, which I also had not cleared. Donald caught her arm, and they continued to the car. That night, the neighborhood Facebook group reached a new level of chaos. Someone had posted a photo of my driveway with the caption, "This is what happens when the HOA cares more about rules than safety." Patricia responded, "The homeowner is deliberately refusing to maintain his property despite multiple notices and fines." Someone else posted, "Maybe if you had let him keep his heated mats, this would not be a problem." Another person, "So we are just supposed to let everyone do whatever they want with their property?" The arguments continued for hours. I stopped reading after a while. It was entertaining but also exhausting. The situation reached a breaking point 2 days later. A delivery truck tried to navigate the icy intersection at the bottom of my driveway, lost traction, and slid sideways into a parked car. Nobody was hurt, but the parked car, which belonged to a newer resident named Amy, was badly damaged. Amy was furious. She posted photos of her car on the Facebook group with a lengthy rant about negligence and liability. She specifically mentioned that she was considering legal action against both the HOA and the homeowner, whose property caused the ice buildup. That got Patricia's attention. The threat of a lawsuit, even an empty one, was serious business for an HOA. They could lose their liability insurance or face huge legal fees fighting it. The next morning, I received a phone call from Donald Kraft instead of Patricia. "Ryan, it is Donald from the HOA board. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I am listening. Look, I am going to be straight with you. Patricia is not happy about this, but the board held an emergency meeting last night. We are prepared to offer a compromise." "I am listening," I repeated. "We will approve your heated driveway mats on a conditional basis. You will need to submit proof that they meet safety standards and get them inspected by a licensed electrician to ensure they are not a fire hazard. If they pass, you can use them. We will also reduce your accumulated fines by half, though we cannot eliminate them entirely." "Why not eliminate them entirely? I was following your rules, just not the rules you wanted me to follow," Donald sighed. "Ryan, I am trying to help you here. Half the board wants to take you to court over this. Patricia is convinced you are being deliberately obstructive. I had to argue for an hour to get them to agree to this compromise. Take the deal." I thought about it. The electrician inspection would cost maybe $200. Half the fines would bring me down to about $1,000, which was still painful but manageable. And I would get to use my heated mats. What about the refund for the original $700 I paid? That is included in the reduction. Essentially, you would owe us about $300 total instead of the full accumulated amount. That was better. Still annoying, but better. And I can use my mats without further harassment. As long as they pass the safety inspection, yes. Fine, I accept. Great. I will send over the paperwork. Get that inspection done as soon as possible and send us the documentation. And please clear your driveway. Will do. I hung up and immediately called an electrician I had used before named Rick. He was able to come out that afternoon. While I waited, I fired up my snowblower and cleared the driveway. It took over an hour because the ice had built up so thick, but eventually I got it down to pavement. Rick showed up at 3. He spent about 30 minutes checking the heated mats, testing the electrical connections, and reviewing the manufacturer specs. "Everything looks good," he said. "These are actually really well made. All listed, proper grounding, built-in temperature controls so they cannot overheat. I will write up a certification letter for you." "Thanks, Rick. I appreciate you coming out on short notice." "No problem. Though I have to ask, why do you need a certification for driveway mats?" I gave him the short version of the HOA saga. He laughed and shook his head. "Man, I am glad I do not live in an HOA. My neighbor painted his house bright purple last year and I just waved and said it looked nice. Because who cares? It is his house." "That sounds like paradise," I said. Rick emailed me the certification letter that evening. I forwarded it to Donald Kraft, paid my reduced fine through the HOA website, and rolled out my heated mats again. I plugged them in and watched with satisfaction as the residual snow on my driveway began to melt. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. About a week later, I came home from work to find my mats had been unplugged. The extension cord was still there, but the mats themselves were cold and covered with snow. I plugged them back in, assuming it was just an accident or maybe the plug had worked loose. The next day, same thing. Unplugged. The third day, I set up my old security camera to watch the driveway. Sure enough, at around 2 in the afternoon, Deborah walked across the street onto my property and unplugged the mats. She looked around nervously, then hurried back to her house. I had her on video. clear as day. I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. They sent an officer out around 4. His name was Officer Mills, a young guy who looked fresh out of the academy. "So she is unplugging your electrical equipment?" he asked, watching the video on my phone. "Yes. 3 days in a row now." "That is technically trespassing and possibly vandalism, depending on how you want to press it. Have you talked to her about it?" "No. She is the daughter of my HOA president who has been making my life difficult over these mats." "I do not think a conversation would be productive." Officer Mills nodded. "I can go talk to her, issue a warning. If she does it again, you can press charges." "That works." I watched from my window as Officer Mills crossed the street and knocked on Deborah's door. She answered and they talked for about 5 minutes. I could not hear what was said, but Deborah's body language was defensive at first, then resigned. She nodded several times. Officer Mills handed her something, probably a written warning, and then came back to my house. "I explained the situation," he said. "She claims the cords are a tripping hazard and she was trying to protect people. I explained that entering your property without permission is trespassing and interfering with your property is illegal. She said she would not do it again. If she does, call us and we will file formal charges." "Thank you, officer." He left, and I thought that would be the end of it. For 2 days my mats stayed plugged in. Then on the 3rd day they were unplugged again. I checked the security camera footage. This time it was not Deborah. It was Patricia. Patricia Henderson, HOA president, had walked onto my property at 1 in the afternoon and unplugged my heated mats. She had also kicked snow onto them for good measure. I called the police again. This time I specifically asked for Officer Mills, figuring continuity would help. He arrived within an hour. "Let me see the footage," he said. I showed him. He watched it twice, his expression growing more serious. "That is the HOA president?" "Yes." "After we already issued a warning to her daughter about the exact same behavior?" "Yes." Officer Mills sighed and rubbed his face. "Okay, this is now a pattern of harassment. I need to talk to my sergeant, but I think we are looking at formal trespassing charges at minimum. Do you want to press charges?" I hesitated. Pressing charges against the HOA president would make living in this neighborhood extremely uncomfortable. But at the same time, she had been harassing me for months over rubber mats, cost me thousands of dollars in fines and legal fees, and was now literally committing crimes on my property. "Yes," I said. "I want to press charges." "All right. I will talk to my sergeant and we will go from there. In the meantime, keep that camera running and do not engage with her directly." Over the next few days, things escalated in ways I did not expect. Officer Mills came back with another officer, and together they went to Patricia's house. I later learned she had been charged with criminal trespassing and misdemeanor vandalism. She was not arrested, but she received a court summons. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Someone, I never found out who, posted about Patricia being charged with crimes related to the heated mat dispute. Half the neighborhood thought it was ridiculous that things had gotten this far. The other half thought Patricia had gone too far and deserved what she got. Donald Kraft called me the day after Patricia was charged. "Ryan, I am calling in a personal capacity, not as a board member. This situation has gotten completely out of hand." "I agree. Patricia is talking about suing you for defamation and malicious prosecution." "I have not defamed anyone and I am not prosecuting her. The state is. She committed crimes on video." I know. I am just telling you what she is saying. Between you and me, I think she has lost perspective on this whole thing. Some of us on the board are discussing asking for her resignation. That seems wise. Look, I know you and Patricia have had issues, But is there any way to de-escalate this? Maybe you could drop the charges and we could ensure the mat situation is resolved permanently. Donald, she came onto my property multiple times to sabotage equipment I am legally allowed to use. After her daughter did the same thing and received a warning. What part of that should I be willing to overlook? None of it. You are right. I am just trying to avoid this turning into a neighborhood civil war. I appreciate that, but I am done being accommodating. Patricia chose to make this personal. Now she can deal with the consequences. Donald thanked me for my time and hung up. He sounded exhausted. The court date for Patricia's trespassing charge was set for March 15th. In the meantime, winter continued. My heated mats worked perfectly. My driveway was always clear. Deborah and Patricia both gave me murderous looks whenever they saw me, but they stayed off my property. In February, Donald Kraft called an emergency HOA meeting to vote on Patricia's future as president. I attended, curious to see how it would play out. The meeting was packed. Every seat was filled and people stood along the walls. Patricia sat at the front table, her face stony and defiant. Donald opened the meeting. We are here to discuss a vote of no confidence regarding Patricia Henderson's position as HOA president. This vote was called by a petition signed by 30% of homeowners, which is the threshold required in our bylaws. Patricia, you have an opportunity to speak before we vote. Patricia stood. She looked older than she had just a few months ago, tired and angry. I have served this community for 8 years, she said. I have worked to maintain our property values and our quality of life. I enforce the rules fairly and consistently. The fact that one resident chose to ignore those rules and escalate a simple dispute into criminal charges is not my fault. I was protecting the integrity of our community. She sat down. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Donald called for testimonies from residents. Several people spoke in Patricia's defense, praising her years of service and dedication. But more people spoke against her, citing this incident and others where Patricia had been overly aggressive in enforcement. George stood up. I have lived here for 15 years. Patricia has done some good things, but she has also made a lot of people miserable over minor rule violations. This situation with Ryan's heated mats is just the most public example. We need leadership that can use common sense, not just follow rules blindly. Others agreed. The tide was clearly turning against Patricia. Finally, Donald called for the vote. It was done by paper ballot to ensure privacy. We all marked our ballots and dropped them in a box. Donald and 2 other board members counted them at the front of the room. The result was not even close. 68% voted for Patricia to be removed as president. Patricia stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out without a word. The room was silent until the door closed behind her. Donald cleared his throat. All right then. The board will meet this week to elect an interim president. This meeting is adjourned. People started talking immediately, the room buzzing with conversation. I left quietly and drove home. 2 weeks later, Patricia's court date arrived. I had to take the morning off work to testify. The courtroom was small, just a municipal court for misdemeanors. Patricia was there with a lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. The proceeding was quick. The prosecutor presented the video evidence of Patricia unplugging my mats and showed the police report documenting the warning that had been issued to her daughter for the same behavior. My testimony was brief. I simply confirmed the facts. The mats were legally approved. Patricia had no permission to be on my property, and she had deliberately unplugged them. Patricia's lawyer argued that it was a misunderstanding, that Patricia had been concerned about electrical safety and acted with good intentions. The judge did not buy it. Miss Henderson, the judge said, Good intentions do not excuse trespassing or vandalism. You had no authority to enter Mr. Young's property or to tamper with his equipment. The fact that you did so after a warning had already been issued makes it clear this was deliberate. I find you guilty of criminal trespassing and vandalism." Patricia's face went pale. The judge continued, "I am sentencing you to 30 days in jail, suspended on the condition of 1 year probation and 100 hours of community service. You are also ordered to pay restitution to Mr. Young for any damages and to stay away from his property. You understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said quietly. And that was it. Patricia Henderson, former HOA president, now had a criminal record. I left the courthouse feeling hollow. I had won, I suppose, but it did not feel great. This whole situation had been stupid from start to finish. All because of rubber mats. Over the next few months, things in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Donald Kraft was elected as the new HOA president. His first act was to revise the architectural review guidelines to include a common-sense provision for temporary, non-permanent installations like my heated mats. Several other residents bought their own mats the following winter. Deborah and her family moved out in May. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they were relocating to Denver for her husband's job. But I suspected Patricia's legal troubles and resignation had something to do with it too. Patricia completed her community service and probation without incident. I saw her occasionally around the neighborhood. She walked her dog in the evening sometimes. We never spoke. George stopped by one afternoon in June while I was washing my car. "Well, you certainly shook things up," he said with a grin. "Not intentionally. Sometimes that is how it happens." For what it is worth, the neighborhood is better off. Donald actually listens to people. We are voting on letting people have vegetable gardens in their front yards next month. Good luck with that. Yeah, we will see. Anyway, I just wanted to say I am glad you stood your ground. Most people would have just rolled over. I almost did. I just got stubborn. Stubbornness has its place, George said. That winter, my heated mats worked perfectly. My driveway was always clear. No ice, no slipping, no problems. I added a second camera to my security system just in case, but nobody bothered my property. In January, I received a letter from the HOA. For a moment, my heart sank, conditioned by months of violation notices. But this letter was different. "Dear Mr. Young," it read, "the HOA board would like to formally apologize for the mishandling of your heated driveway mat situation last year. Your persistence in seeking a reasonable solution led to important reforms in how our community approaches common sense modifications. We appreciate your patience and your contributions to making Maple Ridge Estates a better neighborhood. Sincerely, Donald Kraft, HOA President." I read it twice, then put it on my refrigerator with a magnet. The following month, I was sitting in my living room on a Saturday morning when I saw a truck pull up across the street. Workers started unloading what looked like heated driveway mats. The new family that had moved into Deborah's old house was installing them. I smiled and poured myself another cup of coffee. The whole ordeal had been exhausting and expensive and frustrating. But in the end, something good had come from it. The HOA had reformed its rules. Patricia was no longer in a position to abuse her power. And residents now had more freedom to make reasonable modifications to their own properties. Sometimes standing your ground over something small leads to changes that matter. My heated driveway mats had started as a convenience purchase and ended up being a catalyst for positive change in my community. I never did get a full refund of my fines, but Donald worked with me to reduce them further. In the end, I paid about $500 total, which seemed like a reasonable price for the changes that resulted. By the next fall, when HOA elections came around again, Donald ran unopposed and won easily. He had proven himself to be a fair and reasonable leader. The neighborhood had stabilized. Property values actually went up, probably because people were no longer terrified of arbitrary rule enforcement. I served on the Architectural Review Committee for 1 year, helping to further reform the guidelines. We simplified the language, created clear categories for what required approval and what did not, and established a fast-track process for obviously reasonable modifications. One evening in December, almost exactly 2 years after this whole saga began, I was sitting on my front porch watching the snow fall. My heated mats were running, keeping my driveway perfectly clear. George walked by walking his golden retriever. "Evening, Ryan," he called out. "Evening, George." Matt's still working great, like a charm. I finally got some for myself. Should have done it years ago. Better late than never. He laughed and continued his walk. I sat there for a while longer, watching the snow accumulate on the street and the other driveways while mine stayed clear and safe. It had been a ridiculous fight over a simple solution to a winter problem. But it had taught me something important about standing up for yourself, even when it is uncomfortable. About not backing down just because someone in authority tells you to. About the importance of common sense over blind rule following. My heated driveway mats had become a symbol of something bigger than snow removal. They represented the idea that communities work best when people can exercise reasonable judgment within sensible guidelines, not when every minor decision requires permission from a power-hungry board. As I finished my coffee and headed inside, I glanced across the street at the house where Patricia's daughter used to live. The new family had their Christmas lights up, more elaborate than Deborah had ever done. Under the old regime, Patricia probably would have found some rule they were violating. Now, they were just a nice addition to the neighborhood's holiday spirit. I went to bed that night feeling genuinely content with where things had landed. The fight had been exhausting, but it had been worth it. My driveway was clear, my HOA was reasonable, and my neighborhood was a better place to live. Sometimes the smallest battles lead to the biggest victories. And sometimes, rubber mats on a driveway can change an entire community for the better.